I'm Emily Parker, 38 years old, from Denver, Colorado, and for most of my life, I believed there was something wrong with me. Not because anyone actually said those words, because my family spent decades making sure I felt them. The day my grandfather's will was read, I finally got proof that I had never really been part of the family in their eyes. And, honestly, that should have been the worst day of my life. Instead, it became the beginning of theirs. My grandfather, Robert Whitmore, died at 86. He was the only person in my family who ever treated me like I mattered. When I was little, he'd sit with me for hours, teaching me how to fix old radios in his garage. He remembered my birthday. He came to my school plays. He called me every Sunday after I moved away. Meanwhile, my parents acted like my older brother, Jason, hung the moon. Jason was the golden child. I was the inconvenience. When Jason got a B in school, my parents threw him a celebration dinner. When I got straight A's, they asked why I didn't get extra credit. When Jason wrecked Dad's truck at 17, Dad laughed and called it a learning experience. When I accidentally broke a kitchen plate at 14, Mom grounded me for a month. That was our family dynamic. Everyone knew it. Nobody talked about it. As kids, I kept trying harder. I thought if I became perfect, maybe they'd finally love me. Maybe they'd finally look at me the way they looked at Jason. But perfection never came, and neither did their approval. By 22, I had graduated college with honors. I paid my own tuition through scholarships and part-time jobs. My parents skipped graduation. Jason dropped out after one semester. My parents blamed the school. I moved to Denver and built a career in accounting. I rented a tiny apartment, worked ridiculous hours, lived on instant noodles, slowly built a life. Meanwhile, Jason bounced between jobs, girlfriends, and bad decisions, yet somehow he was still the family hero. Every holiday reminded me where I stood. My parents asked about Jason's dreams. They asked about Jason's plans. They worried about Jason's future. Then they'd turn to me and ask why I wasn't married yet, or why I worked so much, or whether I'd become too selfish. After a while, I stopped expecting anything different. Then came the call about Grandpa. He'd suffered a stroke. I flew home immediately. For 2 weeks, I stayed beside his hospital bed. Jason visited twice. Mom called him devoted. I practically lived there. Nobody noticed. 3 days before Grandpa passed away, he squeezed my hand. His voice was weak. "Emily, yeah, Grandpa, you always deserved better." I smiled. "Don't talk like that." He looked directly into my eyes. "No. Listen to me." His breathing was shallow. "You never needed their approval." I felt tears forming. He squeezed my hand again. "Remember that." Those were the last words he ever said to me. 3 days later, he was gone. The funeral was exactly what you'd expect. Everyone talked about what a wonderful man he was. Everyone cried. Everyone shared stories. And underneath all of it, there was tension, because everyone knew there would be money involved. Grandpa had done very well in life. Nothing extravagant, but enough. The reading of the will happened a week later. I wasn't expecting much, maybe a keepsake, maybe one of Grandpa's old watches. Something sentimental. The lawyer began reading. Specific gifts were distributed. Then came the larger assets. The house, investment accounts. Savings, almost everything went to Jason. My parents received substantial amounts too. I sat there stunned. Then the lawyer turned toward me. "Emily Parker will receive $5,000. 5,000, that was it. I remember feeling physically sick, not because I wanted money, because Grandpa would never have done that. Not willingly. The room was silent. Then Jason smiled. Actually smiled. My mother leaned toward me. "I'm sure Grandpa had his reasons." Those words hurt more than the will. I left before anyone could see me cry. For weeks, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Something felt wrong. The man who spent years telling me I was the most responsible person in the family had left everything to Jason? The same Jason who borrowed money constantly and never paid it back? It didn't make sense. But what could I do? The will was legal, the lawyer confirmed it, life moved on, or at least I tried to move on. I buried myself in work. A year later, I met Daniel. He was kind, funny, stable. For the first time, I felt chosen. We got married 18 months later. I thought I'd finally found the family I never had. I was wrong. The cracks appeared slowly, the late nights at work, acrid phone calls, sudden business trips, little lies that didn't quite add up. Then one evening I came home early, and everything collapsed. Daniel wasn't alone. There was another woman in my house, in my kitchen. Wearing my robe, the divorce that followed was brutal. I lost money, lost trust, lost the future I'd imagined. And once again, my family blamed me. Mom actually said, maybe if you weren't so focused on your career, he'd have stayed. I stopped speaking to them after that. Not dramatically, not with a big fight. I simply stopped calling, stopped visiting, stopped trying. And for the first time in my life, I felt peace. Years passed. I became a partner at my accounting firm, bought a home, built friendships, cried a life that didn't depend on people who never valued me. Then, 6 years after Grandpa died, I received an unexpected call from his former attorney. Emily, there's something you need to see. I almost ignored it. But curiosity won. When I arrived at his office, he looked nervous. Your grandfather left instructions that couldn't be opened until after a certain condition was met. I stared at him. What condition? The sale of one particular property. Apparently, one of Grandpa's investments had finally been sold. The proceeds triggered a sealed directive. The attorney slid a folder across the desk. Inside was a letter, written in Grandpa's handwriting. My hands shook as I opened it. The first sentence nearly made me cry. Emily, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and the truth can finally come out. I kept reading, and suddenly everything made sense. Years before his death, Grandpa had discovered my father secretly pressuring him to change portions of his estate plan. Not illegally, not through forgery, but through manipulation, constant guilt, constant pressure. Claimed that Jason needed more help. Claimed that I was already successful. Grandpa admitted that eventually he gave in, partly because he was tired, partly because he didn't want endless conflict. But he never stopped feeling guilty. Then came the final pages, the secret. Years earlier, Grandpa had created a separate bank account, completely legal, entirely outside the estate. An account nobody knew existed. Not my parents, not Jason, nobody. Except the attorney. The account belonged to me, exclusively. I looked up, certain I had misunderstood. The attorney smiled. No, Emily. You read it correctly. The account contained nearly $2 million. I couldn't speak. For several seconds, I honestly couldn't breathe. Then I started crying. Not because of the money, because Grandpa had seen me. He knew. He understood everything, even when nobody else did. The transfer process took several weeks. Everything was legitimate, documented, legal. By the time the funds arrived, my life changed overnight. But I didn't buy yachts. I didn't buy mansions. I invested carefully, expanded my business interests, crushed financial security. The funny thing about money is that people eventually find out, especially family. 3 months later, my mother called. First time in years. I ignored it. Then she called again, and again. Finally, I answered. Her voice sounded strangely sweet. Emily, honey? Honey, a word she hadn't used in decades. I knew immediately. They knew. Apparently, Jason's investments had failed spectacularly. The inheritance he'd received was mostly gone. My parents had borrowed heavily against their home. Medical bills were piling up. Debt was everywhere. And somehow they believed I was their solution. Mom spent 20 minutes explaining their hardships, then finally asked, "We're family. We help each other." I laughed, not because it was funny, because it was unbelievable. Family? Now? After 40 years? After the inheritance? After Daniel? After everything? I calmly told her no. There was silence. Then came the guilt, then anger, then accusations, the same script they'd always used. Only this time it didn't work. A week later, Jason showed up at my office. He looked older, tired, desperate. For the first time in his life, nobody was rescuing him. Emily, I need help. I looked at him, really looked at him. And I realized something. Jason wasn't the villain. Not entirely. He'd been raised to believe the rules didn't apply to him. My parents created that version of him, then spent decades rewarding it. Now reality had finally arrived. I can't fix this for you, I said. He looked devastated. But we're family. I nodded. Exactly. The irony hit him immediately. For once, neither of us had anything else to say. The months that followed were difficult for them. My parents sold their house. Jason declared bankruptcy. Everyone survived. Nobody became homeless. Nobody starved. But they experienced consequences. Real consequences, the kind they'd spent years protecting Jason from. As for me, I kept living my life. I funded scholarships in Grandpa's name. I expanded my company. I created opportunities for people who had been overlooked, just like I was. A year later, I visited Grandpa's grave. I brought fresh flowers. And for the first time since his death, I felt complete peace. I told him everything about the account, about my parents, about Jason, about the life I'd built. Then I sat quietly for a while, thinking about that final conversation in the hospital. You never needed their approval. For most of my life, I thought winning meant finally being loved by the people who hurt me. I thought success would make them proud. I thought achievement would earn acceptance. I was wrong. The greatest victory wasn't proving them wrong. It was finally stopping the need to prove anything at all. Some people spend their entire lives chasing validation from people who will never give it. Parents, spouses, siblings, relatives. The tragedy isn't that those people fail you. The tragedy is how long you keep waiting for them to change. My family taught me a painful lesson. But Grandpa taught me a better one. Know your worth before someone else decides it for you. Because the people who truly love you won't make you earn your place in their lives. And the people who don't, no inheritance, apology, or amount of money will ever change who they are. The day my family left me out of the inheritance felt like the end of my story. It wasn't. It was the moment my real life finally began.